Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme, exploring watery vibes, songs that remind you of or sound like water, whether that's lakes or creeks or rivers or rain or beaches or whatever. Today we're going to dive into some Fleet Foxes. The track specifically is called Crack Up, and that album cover's already given me some good vibes to begin with. Beautiful landscape. Let's dive in. See what Fleet Foxes has in store for us today.
So the mind won't lie.
Storm rolling in?
And the arm won't say.
I love these little guitar parts.
And the bright red eye is in off you, yeah.
The bass guitar just sort of creating this gallop. Dud,
So the
dud, dud,
words
dud, dud, dud.
and the hand won't touch. In a midnight sun doesn't look like much, as in iris contrast facing the day. I can tell you've cracked like a china plate. When the world insists that the false is so, with a feeling
Interesting. So 5 bars of 3, 15 beats total. That's fairly unusual. Those little intermissions are so wild. It's interesting too, there's not a lot of change in accents. It's sort of a 2-bar or 2-beat idea there. Two doesn't work well with 15, so I'm wondering how that works.
all things change, dividing time forever.
Beautiful. So we have some clipping on the vocals. No chord progression either throughout most of this. What? Let's start with the beginning. Seems like a good place to begin things. It almost felt a little bit of I don't know, Western vibes. A lot of the bass guitar and then eventually also the drum part kind of have a gallopy thing to it. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. It's that longer note into the heavy accent on the downbeat. This paired really well with the general vibes of a storm. Some of that I think did come through in some field recording. I remember the rumble of thunder off in the distance at one point. The song begins with light guitars, two notes here, one note there, a light twinkling over here as if rain is beginning. It's just starting to sprinkle. We haven't quite hit the storm part yet. But you start to feel drops and you almost wonder, oh, dang, is it about to rain? That kind of feeling. You can feel the pressure in the air. You can smell the rain on the wind from off in the distance. It's coming. And I think having this sort of galloping idea feels like you're on a journey about to get swept up into a storm. That's what I get out of the intro, and I think so much of the intro is building on this concept in general. And then out of nowhere, we just have this strange, warbly, compressed, psychedelic electric guitar, if I remember correctly, way in the background. And then the vocals singing something, and we get 2 bars of that, give or take. And then we're back into the galloping stuff, except now it's less of a gallop and more of just a focus on this downbeat attack, constant, consistent. I think the bass is still doing that lead up into that note. We still have the 2 sounds there, but the drums are just locking into this chord pulse. It becomes rigid in a way the opening wasn't, a variation on that concept, but one that removes the looseness and focuses on a rigidity. All of this builds up into another strange transition section. We return back to this more rigid than ever, and then it ends. And then we just have these beautiful vocal lines over a chord. That chord doesn't change, I don't think. It does grow. We start off with just 1 note on these horns, and then 2, and then 3, and then I think we get like a full 4-note stack on it. we do get more information, but the chord itself isn't changing. We're getting more of that chord, but we're not getting different chords. There's no progression here. We're just stuck in this moment. It's getting larger. The vocal runs are becoming more dynamic, more complex. It's not just the melody anymore. There's fancy runs in there as well too. Yeah, good job. And then it ends with footsteps. It's a wild journey across this track as far as any sort of narrative or emotive component to it. I kind of understand parts of it, but I don't understand what any of these parts have to do with the ones that surround them. I think it's going to be interesting to hit the lyrics, but also to check out the comments, especially if you're a fan of Fleet Foxes, how you relate to this track, what it means to you. But I mean, some of y'all are also super perceptive on your first time listen, also. I'd love to hear what you picked up out of this. Anything that might make this feel more cohesive than it did for me on my first time through it. Because we do have general idea of growth or expansion maybe across each of these individual sections. The song just doesn't really grow across the whole. And in fact, in some ways, it becomes reductive, compressing ideas down as we move through some of these sections. Yeah, other than a very stormy beginning and getting stuck in the middle, I don't really have much else to add on, a narrative or personal relationship to this track. It's something that I experienced, but not something I think I related to or even understood, honestly. I do want to bring up numbers. A lot of this track takes place in a 3/4. Right from the start, you can feel it. There is a focus on, especially if you listen to the chord progression itself, every 3 beats, we go to a new chord. Then we go to a new chord right here and another new chord. And that's just kind of how it goes. The rhythmic cadence is fairly consistent across each grouping of 3 beats. It's the chord progression that really gives me the structure to it. But something I noticed is that the fourth chord sticks around for a little bit longer. I followed the chord progression and it didn't quite, that wasn't right here. And that's because it's not 12 beats, which would be 4 bars of 3. 4 bars is an incredibly common way to create phrasing within ideas. This instead is 5 bars of 3. It's 15 beats. The fifth bar is just an extension of that fourth chord. You get to hear it for another bar. I don't think I picked up on this in the intro, the first vocal section. We'll call it a verse maybe. But I did pick up on it in the second part, as rhythmically we began to enter a more rigid idea rather than that loose feeling of the intro. And I tried to figure out what it was trying to say, what it was trying to do. It's certainly odd. And it feels a bit like being stuck at the end of this phrase. We should be returning back to the first chord, and we're not. We hang on to this one for a little longer. Are we unwilling to give it up? Are we trying to leave but can't? I don't know. The rigidity of the rhythmic thing makes me feel like we're stuck, though. And this is actually paired with something interesting that I picked up on the third time through this kind of idea here as we've become even more rigid. But this also showed up in the second part of it. The rhythm is in groups of 2. there's a tick and a talk kind of thing going on with the rhythm, with that general gallopy pulse. There's an emphasized first group and a de-emphasized second group. Well, that kind of feels like it's 2 beats, but when you do that twice, you've got 4 beats, and that would be a bar of 4/4, not of 3/4. How does this work into the idea of a 15-beat phrase, which I'm fairly confident we were still in at the time? I wonder if the 15 isn't seen larger. Instead of 5 bars of 3, it's 10 bars of 3. The first half, the emphasize and de-emphasize, actually, it wouldn't even fit that way. Every other bar would shift where that emphasized beat is. The first time would be 1 and 3, the second bar would be 2, and then 1 and 3, then 2. I didn't get a chance to key into that because I didn't really notice this pattern until we were done with this section and moving into the finale. But there's a friction to this. If you look at it metrically, there's a lot of competing numbers going on here. If you feel the groove out, there's competing grooves. I wonder if this works with the idea of tensing up. We started off the track looser, more familiar with things, and by the middle, it's more rigid. There's less flexibility. Feels like we're contained or caged. It's a hearty friction within that. It is something that stood out to me quite a bit, especially as we got more into the track and I began to see some of the patterns that persisted through the song, but also saw where patterns were subverted and even given the exact opposite treatment as we had heard them previously. I was a fan of the expanded instrumentation on this. It's brass. Y'all knew I was going to love it. But it sounds great. We heard them fairly early on, maybe only 40 to 60 seconds into the track. They were mostly on the outskirts, though, acting as ornamental ideas. We eventually saw them form more into harmonic concepts, pairing well with what the guitars are already doing. I don't think they ever took on a lead role, but I could be forgetting something. But they did become a primary sound in the outro. Something that was sort of on our periphery through a majority of this track becomes the dominant sound in the final third. Once again, though, it's just stacks of a chord, not even a chord progression. It is quite secondary to the vocals, which have movement to them. The brass are there to create texture, to create atmosphere, to create harmony. But we still completely ditched the bass, the guitars, and the drums. I don't know what this is supposed to represent. At times, I thought it wanted to move towards a type of freedom, not a celebratory freedom, but simply to move from one state to another. I already talked about sort of being caged in the middle of this track. So this would be, maybe that caging isn't against the song's will. Maybe that's what it thought it needed to do to progress through this journey, to become more rigid, less flexible, but more reliable, maybe. And we return to a form that's a bit more free at the end, an opening of the mind, while the vocal line is more dexterous than it ever has been. But as we added more and more notes to this brass chord, we began to find some dissonance in here too, more frictional ideas paired with some of the more vibrant ones. I'm not sure what to make of that. It's an intriguing sound. I think it invites connection and speculation. But ultimately, I think this is a track that just requires more than one listen to really get. At the very least, having heard it, I'm fairly intrigued. I would not mind checking it out again, maybe even checking out more of Fleet Foxes, which I have. We've heard a few of them live stream, I think mostly. I don't think we've done any full reactions to them previously. But they're a group that has consistently surprised me with their more progressive take on folk adjacent sounds. which I've always found interesting. Let me hit some lyrics on this and see if that can shine any light on what this track is trying to tell. Some of these sections have names. The first section does not. However, the second is called Iceberg, and the third is called A Bright Clearing. The iceberg, I believe, is when we tighten up the rhythmic device and kind of shy away from the looseness of the beginning. A bright clearing is the horn finale. I've been trying to approach this from three distinct perspectives, then. Maybe not necessarily all from the same person, definitely not all from the same time or mindset. There seems to be a shifting of perspective, whether that's a mental perspective or a literal change in who is speaking that comes through in these three. They all sort of focus on different ideas in general. The first speaks about how, honestly, I'm not 100% sure. I have a gist here. There's a part, it says a midnight sun doesn't look like much as an iris contracts facing the day. I found that this stood out to me pretty strongly, given that a midnight sun would look like a sun. There's nothing really special about it without context. A midnight sun is simply when the sun is still out at midnight. I've never seen anything like that. If you have a clock nearby you, if you're aware of the time, having the sun out in the middle of the night is kind of wild. But if you don't have a concept of time, you just walk outside and the sun's up, there's nothing really special about that. As it says, a midnight sun doesn't look like much. So there's a feeling of context creating import. It says, as an iris contracts facing the day. Basically says the body reacts no different than it normally would. There's really nothing too special about this midnight sun, but it is really special if you understand it, if you've never seen it. It doesn't look different from a daytime sun, but I've never seen the sun at midnight. I've never seen the sun past 9 p.m. It's just not anything I've been in a part of the world where that occurs. That would be a pretty wild phenomenon to me. Not something visually wild, but conceptually wild. A difference between the reality of a situation and the mental idea of that. The rest of the first section doesn't really say too much to me. It says the mind won't lie, the arm won't set, the bright red eye isn't off you yet. The words won't come and the hand won't touch. I don't know. None of that really speaks to me. The second part, though, iceberg, says when the world insists that the false is so, the tighter the fist, the looser the sand. If I don't resist, will I understand? This idea to look around you and find that truth and lie are sort of interchangeable. Maybe inversely so, that not that they're interchangeable, but simply that people accept truth as lies and lies as truth, that people's worldviews are skewed. Perhaps because they're attributing too much of their mental perception of things against a reality of things. Sometimes when it comes to facts, it's more important about how you feel about a data set, more so than what the data set is actually saying. That doesn't make it better, but unfortunately, that is the way that people tend to look at things. Science is no longer something to help support your beliefs, it's something to help justify your beliefs. But he wonders if there's a point to fighting back against this. I don't know about you, but I know people like this, and I have tried to bring reason to them, and it doesn't do anything. If anything, it creates more of a divide between me and that person, which is, well, incredibly sad, but it's just the way things are these days, huh? says the tighter the fist, the looser the sand. The more you try to hang on to it, the more it'll slip through your fingers. Or maybe the more you try to control it. But he says, if I don't resist it, who will? How will change be made? Will I understand where we get to? If you never help educate people, if you never help point them towards the light so that their irises may adjust, they just continue walking around in the darkness. Can you live with that? Can you live with that if it becomes the norm? If you don't try to start the wave of enlightenment again? Verse 3, the bright clearing, all things change, dividing tides as far as I can see, all fades through, but a light of you. We repeat, all I see is dividing tides rising over me. When did this come out? 2017. The idea of truth and lies, fact and fiction being interchangeable, of people who you would want to understand the reality of things feeling so distant from you because they refuse to accept how you see things, how you understand things. Dividing lines, becoming more present and clearer every day, separating people into groups. 2017, yeah, this feels about right to me. That was about the time I started to see this, specifically in the US, but certainly globally not too long after. And maybe even at that time, too, it could have been popping up in other countries, other cultures, other communities. I just hadn't seen it until it rose up and bubbled out of that. It certainly feels like a song reacting to the way that life has changed in the past decade and how they were seeing that change kicking off even back then. How it pertains to the music, I am not entirely sure though. There are certainly the more rigid rhythmic ideas in the second portion that feel alongside the lines of wanting to help people, maybe through a little bit more force or effort than would be necessary. A sort of tightening and rigiding, a tightening up, becoming more rigid as a person that fit well with the music. There is a lot of friction in the outro too. It is called a bright clearing, and I do think that they are trying to create something of an enlightenment feeling there, but it's still not perfect. There's tension, there's friction, there's dissonance tucked inside of those chords. An interesting track through and through, but one still I think I would need more time with to fully grasp what it's trying to tell me. These are my thoughts on Fleet Fox's Crack Up. Let me know what you thought of this track. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on it. If you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this, please put all of that as well as anything else you'd like to into the comments section below. Above that in the description box is a link to Linktree. Takes you here, you can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.